بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Jazakumullah khair for joining us once again for our series in the month of Ramadan with the Quran. Inshallah, going over the book written and authored by Imam al-Nawawi called At-Tibyin or At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamalat al-Quran. We were on the section which was considered to be the main body of the work that was authored by Imam al-Nawawi. So inshallah, we're just going to continue from where we left off. And we are going to be quoting some of the early Salaf, so some of the early Muslims in this lesson. So the author, he mentions قال المؤلف رحمه الله ونفعنا الله بعلومه في الدارين آمين. He says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to benefit from his knowledge. وعن سهل التستري رحمه الله. So he's quoting one of the early scholars called Sahal al-Tustari. So he said, عليه رحمة الله, may Allah have mercy upon him, he said, نظر الأكياس في تفسير الإخلاص. So he said, the intelligent people, those who are intelligent, so al-Akyas is plural of al-Kayyis. Al-Kayyis is somebody who's intelligent. So he said, نظر الأكياس في تفسير الإخلاص. The intelligent people, they came together and they looked into the meaning of al-Ikhlas or sincerity. So they looked into a befitting meaning for the word al-Ikhlas. فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا أو فَلَمْ يَجِدُوا غَيْرَ هَذَا. And all they found was, so the author says, they didn't find anything except أَن تَكُونَ حَرَكَتُهُ وَسُكُونُهُ فِي سِرِّهِ وَعَلَانِيَّتِهِ لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى وَحْدَهُ. He said, they didn't find anything except that all of your movements and your moments of stillness in secret and in open is for the sake of Allah. So this is a really high maqam, or this is a really, really high position for one person to get themselves to. It takes a journey to be able to reach this position. So this is the best of what we can describe as being muhsin, or the concept of al-ihsan. So everything that somebody does, whether they're doing an action or they're in a state of stillness, or they're immobile, or they're not doing anything at all, it's still for Allah's sake. So they said the Akyas, or those people who are intelligent, when they determined to find out the reality of sincerity, that which they found out was that a person's movements, every move that they make, every moment that's immobile, meaning they're not doing anything, when in secret and in open, is for the sake of Allah. لا يمازجه شيء. Nothing mixes into or disturbs this reality. لا نفس. No nafs, or meaning the inclination of the soul. ولا هوى. No desire. ولا dunya. And nothing from the worldly life. And this was mentioned by Al-Bayhaqi in Shu'ab al-Iman. So in his Shu'ab, he mentions this narration. So this is really speaking about, this encompasses every single moment of one's life. So the moments when you're doing something, the moments when you're not doing something, the moments when you're by yourself, and the moments when you're out in the open. Okay? Meaning at all times, you are in a state of absolute sincerity to Allah. That's what sincerity means. And then the author, he says, this sincerity or this reality isn't disturbed by the inclination of the soul. Meaning if there is an inclination, they can be. So the whole point is that there can be an inclination of the soul. However, that inclination does not disturb this sincerity. So meaning it's kept separate. Whereas for many people, the inclination of the soul overpowers, the person's sincerity. So a person who might have even wanted or desired to do something sincerely for Allah's sake, you find that their sincerity has become overpowered by that inclination of their soul, or because of a strong desire, or because of something in the worldly life that has come into this person's attention. So something which is very, very serious then. So al-ikhlas, or to be sincere, it takes a lot of work. And this is where we refer back to the verse of the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Successful is the one who purifies it, and debased is the one who ruins it. So this is the reality of the soul. If a person trains themselves to reach this level of sincerity, this is a person who's truly succeeded. And if a person doesn't reach sincerity, then they've only managed to debase their souls even further. So it's something which is absolutely serious. So, but this narration also gives us an indication of those things which are dangerous to one's sincerity. So not only is it important for us to develop sincerity, but it's also important for us to kind of understand what are those things that I need to be very careful from disturbing any sincerity that I may have. So the author, he says, the nafs, or the inclination of the soul. So the soul sometimes gives suggestions, okay? Meaning, what if you were to do this? And sometimes it might not even be in a person's consciousness at that moment, but then an inclination comes. And this inclination suggests that a person should do something which it shouldn't do. So that inclination of the soul, something that the soul yearns for, the soul enjoys, although it may be wrong. That's something that threatens a person's sincerity. In a situation in which you would be doing something for Allah's sake, something sincerely for His sake, the inclination of the soul may incline towards something else. So the soul may want to achieve status, for example. The inclination of the soul may desire, a good reputation or being renowned. So that's an inclination of the soul that comes into conflict with sincerity. So this is very important for us to know, because depending on the strength of the inclination and the strength of the sincerity, or the level of sincerity, you can find a situation in which they try and balance each other out, and sometimes the sincerity will win and sometimes the inclination of the soul will win. So the inclination of the soul, you should be the head and you should be the one in charge, or you should be the one known by everybody. Everybody should know you. You are the one who's on top of everybody else. These are the kind of things that come into conflict with sincerity. If I do this, everybody will know who I am. That's something which is very dangerous. Though then he says, wala hawa, no desire. So there's a desire. There's a natural desire in the soul. There's a natural desire for something. And this thing might come into conflict, depending on what that desire is. Every person is different. Depending on what that desire is, that might come into conflict with the person. So the person needs to be very, very careful. If they have a desire, a base desire that comes or that can come into conflict with anything that they're doing for Allah's sake, that should be avoided. Wala dunya, nor anything that this worldly life can throw at you. So a person should always be very, very careful as to what this worldly life may throw at them, because this life is always about showing you its glory and its glitter. So a person should always try and be very, very wary of anything that comes from this worldly life, okay? Especially if it comes into conflict with a person's sincerity, because sometimes a person may be offered something from this worldly life, which means that may come into conflict with their principles, i.e. their sincerity. And if that does happen, then that means this person debased their soul. And that's where the entire concept of selling your soul to the devil comes from. Because when you sell your soul to the devil, it means that now you're doing everything, really you're just answering your primordial desires, and that anything of a higher purpose becomes meaningless. So it's something which is always, it's something that's always existed in human history, not something which is new. And you find this also not just in the Islamic tradition, you find it in all other religions as well. The author says, وَعَنِ السِّرِّيِّ رَحِمَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى قال. So As-Sirri, one of the early scholars, he mentioned and he said, so he's describing here, he's giving advice as to what a person should do in order to achieve sincerity. So he says, لا تعمل للناس شيئا. Don't do anything for anybody. It doesn't mean don't help anybody or anything like that. What it means is the reasons or the justifications as to why you do a good deed, let it not be for any sake other than Allah's sake. So لا تعمل للناس شيئا. Don't do any action for the people's sake. ولا تترك لهم شيئا, and do not abandon anything for their sake. Do not do, it's something correct to do. Don't leave it just simply because of the fact that it might become an issue. Do it anyway. Do the good deed, so long as it doesn't harm anybody. There are certain circumstances in which you may stop doing something for the greater good. That's something which is fine, and that's something which is separate. But we're talking about a situation. The author, the scholar here, he's speaking about a situation or circumstance in which it has no impact on anybody. So do not do anything for the sake of the people. وَلَا تَعْمَلْ لِلنَّاسِ شَيْئًا. Don't do anything for people's sake. Everything should be for the sake of Allah. Do not abandon anything also, or stop doing anything for their sake. So don't stop doing a good deed simply because of the sake of the people. Do it. I mean, are you waiting for a reward from people, or are you waiting a reward from your Lord? وَلَا تُعْطِي لَهُمْ شَيْئًا. Don't give them anything. The author he mentions here, quoting As-Sirri. Don't give them anything. So As-Sirri is saying, don't give them anything at all. Meaning the reasons as to why you're doing your action. So the sincerity here. Let it not be remotely something that is for somebody else. Let it be something that you do for Allah's sake. وَلَا تَكْشِفْ لَهُمْ شَيْئًا. And do not expose, okay, or reveal anything to them, to anybody, okay? Because your actions that you do should be a secret affair between you and your Lord. That's what it should be. So everything that you do, it should be a personal secret. So what you're doing outwardly, what you're manifesting outwardly, should have nothing to do, or should have some kind of separation from that which is on the inside. In the sense that nobody needs to know what's going on here. This, you're doing it for Allah. That's the inwardly. The outwardly, you do everything that you can. But inwardly, you understand that the reason why you're doing this is for the sake of Allah. And that's something which is very important. And the last two statements that we made kind of indicates to us that there needs to be some level of balance. Okay? And that's what Imam al-Qushayri refers to in this next quote. And he says, the author says, وَعَنِ الْقُشَيْرِي رَحِمَهُ اللَّهِ. And Imam al-Qushayri, he said, أَقَلُّ الصِّدْقِ إِسْتِوَاءُ السِّرِّ وَالْعَلَانِيَةِ, which is the minimum amount of truthfulness. So being truthful to Allah. The minimum of what it means to be truthful to Allah is that there needs to be a balance. There needs to be an equilibrium between that which is inward and that which is outward. So that which is in secret and that which is in the open. Okay? So there needs to be some kind of equivalency. Okay? There needs to be that equivalency. Meaning you're not doing more outside or out in the open or outwardly than inwardly, or the inside, or in secret. Okay? And had it not been for the fact that there would be nobody outside, had it not been for that fact, you wouldn't, if you would still be doing it, then that's a good sign. Okay, so that's pretty much what Al-Qushayri is saying here. So there needs to be that equivalency. If you're only doing things outside in front of people, and had they not been there, you wouldn't have done it. And you don't do nothing in secret, but everything about you is just what you manifest on the outside, and you only care about your outward manifestation, but you have no care about your inward reality, then this is a person who can never truly be sincere, and this person will never reach the maqam of truthfulness. It's something which is very serious, and we should take very, very seriously. So there needs to be an equilibrium. Does my inward reflect my outward? That's how it should be. So there should be some kind of reflection. My inward, because of my inward, the result of my inward is my outward. That's what it is. So don't get it confused with the statement that we mentioned earlier, when I said earlier that there should be some kind of meaning that everything on the inside is a personal affair between you and Allah. That does not need to be exposed to anybody. Okay? That's not anyone else's business. Your sincerity is between you and your Lord. And that's how it should be. The author, he says, and he quotes Al-Harith Al-Muhasibi. So Al-Harith Al-Muhasibi, he's the author who wrote the book Risalatul Mustarshidin. So Imam al-Nawawi quotes him, making a very important statement, and this is وعن الحارث المحاسبي رحمه الله تعالى, the great Imam al-Harith al-Muhasibi, he said, As-Sadiqu, the truthful person, the one who is meaning truthful to Allah. We're talking about somebody who is truthful to Allah. As-Sadiqu huwa alladhi la yubali لو خرج كل قدر له في قلوب الخلق من أجل صلاح قلبه. He says the truthful person, or the one who is truthful to Allah, is the one who doesn't really care or is not bothered if every single person or the entirety of creation lose all of their respect for him in relation to him or her working towards the betterment of their heart and the rectification of their heart. So if my journey to become better and to become closer to Allah and to rectify my soul will only mean that I will be given blame by people, or people will lose their respect for me, then so be it. A sadiq, a person who's truthful, doesn't really care. So the person who's truthful doesn't really care if they are on their journey, that every single person would then lose what respect that they've had for this person when this person is doing everything that they're doing for the betterment of their own soul. لا يبالي لو خرج كل قدر له في قلوب الخلق من أجل صلاح قلبه. So it's a very, very amazing statement that he made. Sometimes we kind of care about what people think. Sometimes what people think is that which only matters. So if that's the case, then what does that say about who we are? And what does that say about our inward reality? If our inward reality is one in which we only care and we're only doing everything because of the sake that people are looking at us and people have a certain amount of respect for us, or we have a certain status in society, or people look at us in a certain way, and I'm not willing to lose that, whatever the circumstances, I'm not willing to lose that at all, no matter what happens, then is that sincerity? Absolutely not. Is that being truthful to Allah? Absolutely not. As-Sadiqu, the one who is truthful, huwa alladhi la yubali, the person who's truthful is the one la yubali. He doesn't really, or she doesn't really care too much. لو خرج كل قدر له في قلوب الخلق. If they lose all of their respect, or if the people or the creation were to lose all of their respect for them in relation to their journey of betterment of their hearts. So the betterment of their hearts and the reclination of their hearts and the rectification of their hearts and to purify their soul, if that means that I would lose a lot of people along the way, and I would lose a lot of people, and many people would not have love in their hearts for me anymore, or respect me as much anymore, then that's fine. They wouldn't care. So the person who's truthful doesn't care, because ultimately they weren't doing it for the creation anyway. That's the whole point. So it wasn't for the sake of the people that they were doing what they were doing. It was already for the sake of Allah. So it doesn't really matter. People's opinions doesn't really factor into why they're doing what they're doing. So that's a sign of truthfulness, and that's a sign of sincerity. Sometimes, it's quite interesting because we may disagree with people who think differently to us, but we can kind of understand that at least, this person is willing to kind of ostracize themselves because of what they believe in. So even if we don't agree, it at least gives us, or it embeds in us, some kind of respect for this person, even if you completely disagree. And that's something which is interesting. And this comes from this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You gain an inclination of respect to somebody despite your disagreement with them, simply because of the fact that they are doing something that they truly believe is true. And that could be absolutely wrong what they're doing. It could be absolutely, completely incorrect. But the fact that they are doing something, that shows that they're truthful in their sense, in their own world, which is quite interesting. Then he says, and the statement is continuing, so this quote is continuing. وَلَا يُحِبُّ اطِّلَاعَ النَّاسِ عَلَى مَثَاقِيلِ الضَّرِّ مِنْ حُسْنِ عَمْلِهِ, which means, and this person doesn't wish for, nor do they desire, that anybody is exposed to even the smallest and the most minute amount of good deeds that they've done or that they're doing. So you should never, if we want to be sincere, we should not wish for, or I wish the person just walks in right now while I'm praying. I wish that person just takes a glance at me just to see that I'm reading the Quran. I wish so-and-so just recognizes and acknowledges the fact, that I've memorized this much of whatever. That's what he's talking about here. If we're truly truthful, we're really truthful to Allah, then we shouldn't desire that anybody is exposed to any good deeds that we're doing. If we could do it in secret, that's where it should be. And that's where it's best. وَلَا يُحِبُّ اطِّلَاعَ النَّاسِ عَلَى مَثَاقِيلِ الضَّرِّ مِنْ حُسْنِ عَمْلِهِ. A truthful person does not desire, nor do they wish, that any person is exposed to even the most minute good deeds that they've done or that they're doing. And look what he says here, he continues. وَلَا يَكْرَهُ اطِّلَاعَ النَّاسِ عَلَى السَّيِّئِ مِنْ عَمَلِهِ. And this person doesn't dislike the fact that a person might have been exposed to something wrong that they did. So I did something wrong. I want to make sure that nobody in the world ever finds out. No, the truthful person doesn't really care, because they know that, everybody's human. There's nobody who has immunity from mistakes anyway. But the whole point is everything is in balance. A person who's sincere is living in balance. If they don't love the fact that people know the good that they do, they don't really care about people being exposed to or knowing about anything wrong as well. وَلَا يَكْرَهُ. They don't hate the fact that people might be exposed to some deficiency or some flaws that they may have. So that somebody, let's say for example, there might be somebody who has miserliness. So let's say they have an issue with bukhul. Bukhul is miserliness. So they don't like to give charity because they like to hold on to their money, as an example. So people don't like, this person doesn't care if they were sincere or truthful to Allah. It means that they wouldn't hate the fact that people know that flaw about them. Imagine. And Al-Harith al-Muhasibi continues, he says, فَإِنَّ كَرَاهَتَهُ لِذَلِكَ. He says, because if they really dislike people knowing about their flaw, if they really dislike it, because if they really, what does it mean? It means that you only want to portray a saintly picture of yourself. You're a saintly person. Nobody's a saintly figure. Everybody has their faults and their mistakes. He says, فَإِنَّ كَرَاهَتَهُ لِذَلِكَ. That great amount or that disproportionate amount of dislike that they have for somebody being exposed to any flaw is an evidence. دليل على أنه يحب الزيادة عندهم. It's an evidence that suggests that this person has a desire from these people. You will only have because when you only portray a false picture from somebody that you have some desire from. You have a desire from them. You want them to look at you in a certain way. You want them to treat you in a certain way. You want them to imagine you in a certain way. You want them to maybe give you something, or you expect things from them. Then obviously there's certain things you don't want them to forever find out about you, whatever the cost. So that's what the author is talking about over here. That's what he's mentioning Al-Harith al-Muhasibi. We're talking about deep psychology. He's talking about real psychology over here. So why people do things. He's saying that level of dislike that somebody is simply because of the fact that we haven't let go of the fact that, we haven't let go of the fact that we want people to always have a good perspective of us. And that's what it is. And we have a certain desire from them, whatever that is, whatever that desire or that increases in having a good reputation, them looking at you in a good way, them giving you something, whatever the case is. And then he concludes, Al-Harith al-Muhayyi by saying, وَلَيْسَ هَذَا مِنْ أَخْلَاقِ الصِّدِّيقِينَ. He says this is not the behavior of the truthful people. So this is not the behavior of the truthful one. And this is mentioned in Risalat al-Qushayri. As Imam al-Qushayri, he transmits this statement in his treatise, famous treatise called Al-Qushayriya. So it's very interesting how we do so much and how much we take care of ourselves simply because of the opinions that people may have of us. Imam Nawawi, he quotes and he says, وَعَنْ غَيْرِهِ and regarding others. I mean, there's other statements that, for example, say, إِذَا طَلَبْتَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى بِصِدْقِ أَعْطَاكَ مِرَاءَةً تُبْصِرُ فِيهَا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ مِنْ عَجَائِبِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. This is also mentioned in Al-Qushayri, or Risalat al-Qushayriya. So he says, there's a statement made, that if you desire, it's been said, if you seek out Allah with truthfulness, meaning if you seek Allah with truthfulness, أَعْطَاكَ مِرَاءَةً, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you a mirror or a reflection or a reflective object. تُبْصِرُ فِيهَا, you will see in it everything from the amazement and the wondrous things of this worldly life and the afterlife. Meaning you will subject yourself to many miraculous experiences. If you are truthful to Allah in seeking Allah's pleasure, and if you're truthful in your relationship to Allah, you will then expose yourself and you will reach a position in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what happened when Ibrahim sought out Allah. وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we showed Ibrahim the dominion of the heavens and the earth so that he can be from the people who have absolute certainty. So if you seek Allah out with truthfulness, Allah will give you that reflective object or mirror in which you will see all of the wondrous things in this worldly life and the afterlife. So you will see things which will amaze you, that you would have ever been experienced by the human being. And then Imam Nawawi, he says, وَأَقَاوِيلُ السَّلَفِ فِي هَذَا كَثِيرَةٌ. And the statements made by the early Muslims are many. He says, أَشَرْنَا إِلَى هَذِهِ الْأَحْرُفِ مِنْهَا. We only mentioned a few in this section. تَنْبِيهًا عَلَى الْمَطْلُوبِ, just to give notification and to give just to make it aware in relation to that which we are undertaking. وَقَدْ ذَكَرْتُ جُمَلًا مِنْ ذَلِكَ. He goes, I mentioned some of this already. مع شرحها, with a commentary, في أول شرح المهذب, in the beginning, on the introduction of the commentary of Al-Muhadhab. So Imam al-Nawawi, he wrote a commentary on a book called Al-Muhadhab. This book is written by Abi Ishaq al-Shirazi, and Imam al-Nawawi wrote a commentary on it called Al-Majmu'. So he says, in the beginning of Al-Majmu', I quoted many of these statements, similar statements that we mentioned here, along with a commentary on it. And then he said, وَضَمَمْتُ إِلَيْهَا مِنْ آدَابِ الْمُعَلِّمِ وَالْمُتَعَلِّمِ, and I included therewith the etiquettes of the teacher and the student, وَالْفَقِيهِ وَالْمُتَفَقِّهِ, the jurist and the aspiring jurist, مَا لَا يَسْتَغْنِي عَنْهُ طَالِبُ عِلْمٍ, that which is incumbent for any student of knowledge to know, that which any student of knowledge cannot be or cannot do without. Then he says, the author, and he concludes with Wallahu A'lam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And in that we shall conclude this session. Jazakumullahu khairan, wa barakallahu fikum, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, walhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.